When tech mogul Elena Vasquez's Tesla dies on a deserted highway at 2 a.m., she expects roadside assistance, not rescue from a paint-splattered pickup truck. Marcus Chen pulls over anyway, his daughter's asleep in the back seat, his bank account's overdrawn, but something about the stranded woman in designer heels makes him stop. What begins as a simple act of kindness spirals into a collision of two worlds, her corner office empire and his kitchen table dreams. Sometimes the biggest risks aren't taken in boardrooms, but on empty roads where strangers become the unexpected architects of each other's futures. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The Tesla's dashboard went black at exactly 2:17 a.m. Elena Vasquez sat in perfect silence on the shoulder of Highway 101, her hands still gripping the steering wheel, though the car had been dead for 3 minutes. The red hazard lights pulsed against her face on, off like a heartbeat she couldn't control. Through the windshield, Silicon Valley stretched out in geometric patterns of light. Her building rose somewhere in that glow, 37 floors of glass and ambition where today, technically she'd announced the biggest acquisition in Virtutech's history. $2.4 billion. The press release sat finished in her phone, waiting. But tonight she was just a woman with a dead battery on an empty highway. She pressed the Tesla's touchscreen. Nothing. The silence felt heavy, unfamiliar. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd sat anywhere without the hum of electronics, the ping of notifications, the constant digital heartbeat of her empire. Her phone showed 2 bars. She scrolled through contacts, past hundreds of names, investors, executives, engineers looking for someone she could call at 2 a.m. who wouldn't ask questions. The list felt suddenly hollow. Roadside assistance, she decided, but when she tapped the app, it spun endlessly. No signal strong enough for data. A semi-truck roared past, shaking her car. Then another. The highway stretched ahead and behind like a concrete river, and she was an island. She tried the Tesla's door handle. It stayed locked, dead battery, dead locks. The windows wouldn't roll down. She was trapped in a tomb of German engineering and sustainable luxury. This is ridiculous. Elena pulled out her phone's flashlight and held it against the windshield, waving it like a flag of surrender. Nothing. The trucks kept rolling past, their drivers seeing only darkness. Then headlights approached from behind, slowing. A pickup truck, old, paint-splattered, with a dent in the front bumper pulled onto the shoulder. Through her rear window, Elena watched a man step out, tall, lean, wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked like he belonged in a coffee shop in Portland, not rescuing stranded tech executives. He approached her driver's side window cautiously, the way you'd approach a hurt animal. "You okay in there?" His voice was muffled through the glass. Elena held up her phone, miming that she couldn't get out. The man, 30s, dark hair, kind eyes, stepped back and studied the Tesla like it was a puzzle. "Battery's dead," he called out. "Car won't unlock, right?" She nodded. He jogged back to his truck and returned with a small device that looked like a jump starter. "I'm going to try something. Don't be scared if the car starts up suddenly." Elena watched him pop her hood. Somehow he knew exactly where the manual release was hidden and connect cables to her battery. After a moment, her dashboard flickered to life. The door locks clicked open. She stepped out into the night air, suddenly aware of how quiet highways could be between the trucks. Her heels clicked against asphalt. "Thank you." The words felt rusty. How long since she'd genuinely thanked someone? "I mean it, thank you." "No problem." He was already coiling his cables. "Marcus Chen." He offered his hand. "Elena." She shook it, noticing paint under his fingernails, calluses on his palm. "That was. I don't know what I would have done. Probably called AAA like a normal person." Marcus grinned. "But they'd take 2 hours to get out here. I was heading home anyway." Elena glanced at his truck. Through the rear window, she glimpsed a car seat with a small figure curled up in it, fast asleep. "Your daughter?" "Lily?" 7 years old, heavy sleeper. We were at my mom's for dinner. It ran late." Marcus followed her gaze. "Don't worry, she's fine. Kid could sleep through an earthquake." Something in his voice, tired but gentle, made Elena look at him more carefully. There were lines around his eyes, the kind that came from smiling and worrying in equal measure. "What do you do?" she asked, though she could guess from his clothes, his truck, the paint under his nails. "I'm a contractor, houses mostly." "Some commercial work." Marcus closed her hood, the sound sharp in the night air. "What about you?" Elena hesitated. She'd spent 15 years building Virtue Tech from nothing, transforming from Elena Vasquez, daughter of immigrant hotel cleaners, into Elena Vasquez, CEO, featured on magazine covers and conference stages. But standing here in the highway darkness, that identity felt strange on her tongue. "I work in tech." "Ah." Marcus nodded like that explained everything. "That why you're out driving at 2 a.m.? Some big deadline?" "Something like that." She wanted to say more about the acquisition, about the 18-hour days, about how she'd left her office tonight and started driving with no destination in mind, just needing to move through space while her mind raced through tomorrow's presentation. Instead, she said, "Can I pay you? For helping?" Marcus looked genuinely confused. "Pay me? For jumping a battery? I don't know. Gas money? Your time?" "I was already driving this direction," he shrugged. "Besides, my mom raised me better than that." Elena felt something unfamiliar embarrassment. When was the last time someone had done something for her without wanting something in return? Well, she smoothed her jacket, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. Designer clothes on a highway at 2 a.m. "Thank you, really." Marcus was already walking back to his truck, but he paused. "You sure you're okay to drive?" "You seem," he searched for the right word. "Rattled." Rattled. Elena almost laughed. She'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, but a dead battery had undone her completely. "I'm fine, just tired." "Okay." Marcus didn't look convinced. "Drive safe." He climbed into his truck and pulled away, taillights disappearing around a curve. Elena stood alone beside her Tesla, listening to its quiet hum. She should get back on the road. The presentation was in 6 hours. She needed sleep, needed to review her notes one more time, needed to call her assistant and make sure everything was ready for the press conference. Instead, she found herself thinking about Marcus Chen's hands steady and sure as he'd worked on her car. When was the last time she'd used her hands for something real, something that mattered beyond spreadsheets and strategic plans? She got back in the Tesla and sat for a long moment before putting it in drive. Elena's penthouse sat on the 40th floor of a building she'd helped design, all glass and steel and views that stretched to the bay. She poured herself a glass of wine, something expensive she couldn't taste, and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows. The city looked like a circuit board, all lights and connections. Somewhere down there, Marcus Chen was probably tucking his daughter into bed, checking her homework from earlier, maybe reading her a story. When had Elena last read a story to someone? When had anyone read one to her? She'd been 10 when her parents started working double shifts, her mother cleaning hotel rooms during the day, her father maintaining the boilers at night. Elena would do homework alone at the kitchen table, heating up leftovers, going to bed by herself while they worked to keep their small family afloat. Success had been her bedtime story. Someday she'd build something that mattered, something that would mean her parents never had to work so hard again. Now she owned 4 homes, and her parents still lived in the same small apartment. Too proud to accept her help, too set in their ways to change. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from David, her CFO. "Legal finished the contracts. Press conference is set for 9 a.m. "You ready to make history?" she typed back. "Ready." But standing at her window, watching the lights of a city that never slept, Elena felt anything but ready. She felt like a woman who'd forgotten how to say thank you, who'd been rescued by a stranger's kindness and hadn't known how to respond. She thought about Marcus's truck, the sleeping child in the back seat, the way he'd helped without hesitation. There was something there, something real in a world that felt increasingly made of pixels and promises. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen island, the acquisition presentation glowing on its screen. $2.4 billion to buy a startup that made virtual reality software for corporate training. It would make Virtutech the dominant player in enterprise VR, position them for the next phase of digital transformation. It was brilliant. It was strategic. It was everything she'd worked toward. So why did it feel so hollow? Elena closed the laptop and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept thinking about steady hands and paint-stained fingers, about the sound of cables being coiled in the darkness, about a man who'd helped a stranger and asked for nothing in return. At 4 a.m., she got up and made coffee, standing at her window, as the city began to wake up. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was probably making breakfast for his daughter, helping her get ready for school, being present for all the small moments that mattered. Elena had built an empire, but she'd forgotten how to build a life. The sun rose over Silicon Valley, painting the sky in shades of possibility. In 5 hours, she'd stand in front of cameras and announce the biggest deal of her career. But all she could think about was a man who'd stopped to help, and the question he'd asked that she couldn't shake. "You sure you're okay?" No, Elena realized. She wasn't sure at all. The Virtutech conference room smelled like fresh coffee and ambition. Elena stood at the head of the glass table, watching her executive team file in with tablets and energy drinks, their faces bright with the particular intensity that came before big announcements. "Good morning, everyone." Her voice carried the authority she'd cultivated over 15 years, steady, confident, unshakable. "Today we make history." David Chenno relation to Marcus. She'd pulled up the presentation on the wall-mounted screens. Charts and projections filled the room in blues and whites, clean lines that told the story of Virtutech's inevitable dominance. "The Nexus acquisition positions us perfectly," David was saying. "Their VR training platform, combined with our enterprise solutions, creates a market cap potential of $15 billion by 2027, Elena finished. She'd memorized every number, every projection. "I know." But as she looked around, the tablet faces focused on screens, fingers, tapping calculations into Phoneshi, found herself thinking about a different kind of presentation. A 7-year-old girl showing her father a drawing, maybe. Crayon marks on construction paper that mattered more than all the pixels in this room. "Elena?" Sarah Kim, her head of marketing, was looking at her with concern. "You were saying about the press strategy?" Elena blinked back to the present. "Right. We announce at 9. Trading opens at 9:30. By noon, every tech journalist in the Valley will be calling this the deal of the decade. The meeting continue logistics, talking points, contingency plans." Elena participated, her voice steady and sure, but part of her remained on that dark highway, watching a man with paint-stained hands help a stranger without asking for anything in return. At 8:45, they moved to the main auditorium. Camera crews had transformed the space into something that looked more like a TV studio than a corporate conference room. Elena stood backstage, adjusting her jacket, watching the room fill with reporters and analysts. 5 minutes, her assistant whispered. Elena nodded and pulled out her phone. Without really thinking about it, she opened a browser and searched. Marcus Chen, contractor, Bay Area. Several results appeared. Chen, Associates Construction. A simple website with before and after photos of kitchen renovations, bathroom remodels, small commercial projects. The testimonials were warm, personal. "Marcus transformed our dated kitchen into something beautiful. Professional, reliable, and truly cares about his work." At the bottom of the page, a photo. Marcus standing next to a freshly painted house, wearing the same flannel shirt from last night, smiling at the camera with tired but genuine eyes. 2 minutes. Elena closed her phone and walked to the wings. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the audience, investors in $1,000 suits, journalists with cameras ready, analysts with questions that would determine Virtutech's stock price for the next quarter. This was what she'd built her life toward. This moment, this stage. So why did she feel like she was about to perform someone else's story? "Ladies and gentlemen, Elena Vasquez, CEO of Virtutech." Applause filled the auditorium. Elena walked onto the stage, into the lights, toward the podium where her words would be broadcast around the world. The presentation remote felt solid in her hand. "Good morning." Her voice carried clearly through the room. "Today, Virtutech takes a bold step into the future." The slides advanced automatically. Charts and graphs told their story with mathematical precision. Elena heard herself speaking about market opportunities, about synergies, about the inevitable digitization of human experience. But something felt wrong. She looked out at the audience, really looked, and saw faces illuminated by phone screens. People recording her words, calculating stock impacts, already composing headlines. No one was truly listening. They were consuming content, processing data, waiting for the number that would tell them how to feel about what she was saying. Virtutech's acquisition of Nexus Industries represents a $2.4 billion investment in virtual reality training platforms, she heard herself say. By 2027, we project. Elena stopped mid-sentence. The auditorium fell silent. Camera operators leaned closer. In the front row, David looked alarmed. "I'm sorry," Elena said slowly. "I need to say something else first." She clicked to a blank slide, then set down the remote. "Last night, my car broke down on Highway 101. Dead battery, middle of nowhere, 2 in the morning. Her voice was quieter now, but somehow it carried better than before. A man stopped to help me. A contractor named Marcus Chen, driving home with his daughter asleep in the back seat. He jumped my battery. Took maybe 10 minutes. When I offered to pay him, he looked at me like I'd suggested something ridiculous. Like helping a stranger was just what you do." Elena could see confusion spreading through the audience. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how tech announcements worked. I've been thinking about that moment all morning, about hands that know how to fix things, about help that comes without expectation, about what it means to build something real. She paused, looking out at faces that were no longer hidden behind screens. Virtutech has always been about connection, about using technology to bring people together, to create experiences that matter. But somewhere along the way, I think we forgot what real connection looks like. So yes, we're acquiring Nexus Industries. Yes, it's a $2.4 billion deal that will transform our market position. But that's not the real story. Elena felt something loosening in her chest, like a knot she'd been carrying for years. The real story is what we do with that technology. How we use it to help people learn, grow, connect with each other in meaningful ways. How we remember that behind every screen, every headset, every virtual experience, there are real people with real lives who deserve more than just content consumption. The auditorium was completely quiet now. Elena could see reporters actually putting down their phones, paying attention in a way that felt different, deeper. "I started Virtutech because I believed technology could make the world better. Not more efficient, not more profitable better, more human. And I still believe that. But it means we have to remember what human actually looks like." Elena picked up the remote and advanced to the final slide, a simple image of the Virtutech logo with their old motto, "Technology in service of human connection." That's what this acquisition is really about. Not market dominance, but human service. Not virtual reality, but actual reality, the kind where strangers help each other on dark highways, where we use our hands to build things that matter, where connection happens person to person, moment to moment. She looked directly into the main camera. "Questions?" The first hand up belonged to a reporter from TechCrunch. "Ms. Vasquez, are you saying Virtutech is pivoting away from enterprise VR?" "I'm saying we're pivoting toward humanity. Enterprise VR is a tool. What matters is how we use it." "But what about the financial projections? The $15 billion market cap?" Elena smiled genuinely this time. "Money follows mission, not the other way around. When we build technology that actually serves people, the financials take care of themselves." More questions came, but Elena found herself answering differently than she ever had before. Instead of jargon and buzzwords, she used simple language. Instead of projections and possibilities, she talked about purpose and people. After 20 minutes, she thanked the audience and walked off stage. Backstage, her team looked shell-shocked. "Elena," David said carefully, "that wasn't exactly what we rehearsed." "No," she agreed. "It was better. But the analysts will figure out what it means. Or they won't." Elena felt lighter than she had in years. "Either way, we told the truth." Sarah Kim was checking her phone. "Social media is going crazy. Human connection is already trending. People are calling it the most authentic tech announcement they've ever seen." Elena wasn't surprised. In a world full of polished presentations and calculated messaging, authenticity stood out like a beacon. But she wasn't thinking about social media metrics. She was thinking about a small construction company website, about before and after photos of kitchens that had been transformed by careful hands. "I need to make a phone call," she said. Elena sat in her office an hour later, staring at Marcus Chen's business number on her computer screen. Outside her windows, Silicon Valley hummed with its usual intensity, but something felt different, quieter, more real. She dialed before she could overthink it. "Chen, Associates, this is Marcus." "Hi, it's Elena. From last night, the Tesla." A pause. "Elena. Hey. Everything okay with your car?" "The car's fine. I wanted to thank you again, and ask you something." "Okay." Elena took a breath. "How would you feel about doing some work for Virtutech? We're renovating our employee spaces, making them more human." Another pause. "You mean like office renovations?" "I mean like creating spaces where people actually want to work, where they feel connected to each other and to what they're building." "You seem to know something about that." Marcus laughed, a warm sound that made Elena smile despite herself. "I don't know anything about tech companies." "Good. That's exactly why I want to hire you." "Elena." Marcus's voice grew more serious. "I saw the news this morning, about your announcement. $2.4 billion. You sure you want to hire a guy who paints kitchen cabinets?" Elena looked around her sterile office glass and steel and perfect sight lines that revealed nothing about the person who worked there. "I'm sure," she said. "When can we meet?" Marcus arrived at Virtutech headquarters on Thursday wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt that looked like it had been pressed with care. Elena watched him from her office window as he stood in the parking lot, looking up at the glass tower with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle. She met him in the lobby herself, ignoring her assistant's surprised look. "You came," she said. "You asked." Marcus shook her hand with the same steady grip she remembered from the highway. "Though I'll be honest, I'm not sure what I'm doing here." Elena led him to the elevator, past walls lined with awards and magazine covers featuring her face. She found herself seeing the space through his eyesore surfaces and no soul. "Tell me what you think," she said, as they rose toward the executive floors. Marcus studied their reflection in the polished steel doors. "About what?" "About this place. What you see." The doors opened onto the 37th floor. Marcus stepped out into the executive suite glass offices arranged around an open workspace where employees sat at identical desks, staring at identical screens. He walked slowly through the space, his contractor's eye taking in details Elena had stopped noticing years ago. The harsh LED lighting, the complete absence of color, the way people worked in isolation despite sitting 3 feet apart. "It's very." Marcus paused at a window overlooking the valley. "Clean. Clean. Sterile. Like a hospital, but for information instead of medicine." He turned to face her. "Is that what you were going for?" Elena looked around her domain with fresh eyes. "I thought we were going for efficiency." "How's that working out?" It was a simple question, but it hit her like a punch. Elena thought about the turnover rate in engineering, the burnout complaints from HR, the way people rushed out of the building at exactly 5 p.m. as if escaping something. "Not great," she admitted. Marcus nodded and pulled out a small notebook, the kind with graph paper, held together with a rubber band. "Mind if I ask some questions?" They spent the next 2 hours walking through every floor of Virtutech. Marcus asked about workflow, about collaboration, about how people actually used the spaces. He sketched quick diagrams, noted lighting levels, observed how employees moved through the building, but mostly, he listened. "The kitchen on 14, he said as they rode the elevator back to Elena's office. "That's where the real work happens." Elena frowned. "The kitchen? People were talking there." "Actually talking, not just exchanging information. I saw a programmer explaining something to someone from marketing using coffee stirrers as props. 2 designers were sketching on napkins. That felt alive. We have collaboration spaces. You have conference rooms with whiteboards. That's not the same thing." Elena thought about that as they settled in her office. Marcus sat across from her desk, his notebook open, completely at ease despite being 40 floors above the ground in a building worth more than some small country's GDP. "So what would you do?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his pen tapping against the notebook. "Can I ask you something first?" "Sure." "What did you want to be when you were 7? The question caught Elena off guard. "What? 7 years old. What did you dream about becoming?" Elena tried to remember. 7 years old would have been 1995. She'd been in 2nd grade, living in a cramped apartment where the walls were so thin she could hear the neighbor's television through her bedroom wall. "A teacher," she said slowly. "I wanted to be a teacher." "Why?" "Because Mrs. Rodriguez made our classroom feel like home. She had plants everywhere, and books in both English and Spanish, and she knew everyone's name by the 2nd day. She made us feel like we mattered." Marcus smiled and made a note. "What happened to that dream?" Elena felt something twist in her chest. "I grew up. Realized teachers don't make enough money to help their parents retire. But you liked the idea of helping people learn." Yes. I did." Marcus flipped to a fresh page. "What if we designed this place like Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom? Not the plants and books, though, maybe some of that too. But the feeling. The sense that people matter, that they're seen, that they're part of something bigger than themselves." Elena stared at him. In 15 years of building Virtutech, no one had ever asked her about 2nd grade. "How would we do that?" Marcus started sketching. "Break down these glass walls, for starters. Create neighborhoods instead of departments. Give teams spaces that they can make their own paint colors, furniture arrangement, even the lighting." His pen moved quickly across the paper, rough lines becoming floor plans. "Natural light wherever possible. Places for people to have actual conversations, not just meetings. A real kitchen, not just a coffee station. Maybe some outdoor space. We have a roof deck that no one uses because it feels like a corporate event space." Marcus looked up from his notebook. "I'm talking about somewhere people want to eat lunch, not network." Elena found herself leaning forward, caught up in his vision. "What else?" "Flexible spaces. Not everything has to be permanent. Let teams reconfigure their areas based on what they're working on. Give people agency over their environment. The building codes are guidelines, not prison sentences. There are ways to work within regulations while still creating spaces that feel human." Marcus flipped the notebook around so she could see his sketches. They weren't architectural drawings, more like visual notes, ideas captured in quick strokes. But Elena could see it. Spaces that invited collaboration, areas that felt warm and welcoming, an office that looked like a place where people might actually want to spend their days. "This would be expensive," she said. Marcus nodded. "Cheaper than losing good people to companies that treat them better." "You think that's what's happening?" "I think you hired me because your instincts are telling you something's wrong. Trust those instincts." Elena studied the sketches, trying to imagine her sterile floors transformed into something more human. "How long would something like this take?" "Depends how much we change. But if we're smart about it, we could do it in phases. Start with 1 floor, see how people respond. A pilot program." "Exactly." Marcus closed his notebook. "Though I have to scare you sure about this? It's not just about construction. You'd be changing the entire culture of your company." Elena thought about her employees rushing toward the elevators at 5 p.m. about conference rooms where people stared at phones instead of each other, about the way innovation happened in kitchen conversations rather than official brainstorming sessions. "Maybe that's what we need," she said. They talked for another hour about timelines and budgets, about which floor would make the best pilot, about how to communicate changes to employees who might resist anything that disrupted their familiar routines. But Elena found herself distracted by smaller details, the way Marcus's hands moved when he explained his ideas, the care with which he'd listened to people throughout the building, the fact that he'd asked about her childhood dreams as if they mattered to her work as an adult. "I should let you get back to your day," Marcus said finally, standing to leave. "Wait." Elena stood too, suddenly not wanting him to go. "Can I ask you something now?" "Sure." "What did you want to be when you were 7? Marcus smiled, that same genuine expression she remembered from the highway. "A carpenter, like my grandfather. He built things that lasted. And here you are. Here I am." Marcus paused at her office door. "Though if we're being honest, I never imagined I'd be designing spaces for tech companies. Life has a way of surprising you." After he left, Elena sat in her office looking at the city below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was driving back to job sites and paint supplies, to a world where people built things with their hands and measured success in satisfied customers rather than stock prices. She pulled out her phone and called David. "I want to move forward with the renovation project," she said when he answered. "What renovation project?" "The one we're going to announce on Monday. Full transformation of the executive floor, then rolling out to the rest of the building based on employee feedback." "Elena, we never discussed. We're discussing it now. Set up a meeting with facilities and HR. I want a timeline by Friday." She hung up before David could object and turned back to her window. For the first time in years, Virtutech felt like it might become the company she'd originally dreamed of building. That evening, Elena found herself driving toward the address on Marcus's business card instead of going home to her empty penthouse. She told herself she needed to see examples of his work, to understand his aesthetic before committing to a major renovation. But really, she just wanted to see what a life looked like when it was built around creating rather than acquiring. Marcus's workshop sat in an industrial area of South Bay, squeezed between a tire shop and a commercial kitchen supply store. Elena parked her Tesla next to his paint-splattered pickup and walked toward a building that looked like it had been repurposed from something else, maybe a small warehouse or auto repair shop. Through the open bay door, she could see workbenches covered with tools, half-finished cabinet doors propped against walls, the organized chaos of a place where things got made. "Elena?" Marcus emerged from the back of the workshop, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see your work." Before we move forward, Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, leaving streaks of wood stain. "I wasn't expecting company. The place is a mess." "I don't mind mess." It was true. The workshop felt alive in a way her sterile offices never did. She could smell sawdust and polyurethane, hear the hum of machinery, see the evidence of hands engaged in purposeful work. "What are you working on?" she asked, walking toward a partially assembled kitchen cabinet. "Custom island for a family in Palo Alto." They wanted something that would grow with their kids' adjustable height, storage that can be reconfigured as they get older. Elena ran her fingers along the wood, feeling the smooth finish. "You made this from scratch?" "Cut the lumber myself. It's maple sustainable harvest from Oregon." Marcus joined her beside the cabinet. "The family has 3 kids under 10. In 15 years, this kitchen will still be working for them, just differently." "You think that far ahead?" "I have to. Wood is patient, but it's also permanent. What I build today has to make sense for decades." Elena thought about Virtutech's rapid pivots, their constant chase after the next new thing. When had she last built something designed to last? "Can I see something else?" she asked. Marcus led her through the workshop, showing her projects in various stages of completion. A dining table made from reclaimed barnwood. Built-in bookshelves designed around a family's specific collection. A desk with hidden compartments for a writer who needed to organize research materials. Every project is different, Marcus explained. I spend as much time listening to what people need as I do actually building. That's why the kitchen on 14 felt different. What do you mean? Elena picked up a small tool from his workbench, a chisel with a wooden handle worn smooth by use. When you walked through our building today, you weren't just seeing spaces, you were seeing people. The way they move, the way they work, what they need to feel comfortable. Marcus took the chisel from her hands, his fingers brushing hers for a moment. That's the job. You can't build something useful without understanding who's going to use it. I've been building for 15 years without understanding that. You've been building products. That's different from building spaces. Elena watched Marcus return the chisel to its place among dozens of other tools, each one positioned exactly where his hands expected to find it. How did you learn to do this? The listening part, I mean. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes focused on his workbench. My ex-wife used to say I was better at hearing wood than hearing people. She wasn't wrong. What changed? Lily changed. When she was 3, she went through this phase where she'd build these elaborate structures with blocks. Not just towers, whole cities, with roads and parks and houses for different families. Marcus smiled at the memory. But she'd get frustrated when I'd try to help because I'd focus on making the building stable instead of listening to the stories she was trying to tell. Elena could picture it, a small girl with architectural dreams, a father learning to see through her eyes. One day she told me, "Daddy, you're not listening to what the blocks want to be." It stopped me cold. Here was this 3-year-old teaching me about paying attention. And that changed how you work? Changed everything. Now when clients hire me, the first thing I do is spend time in their space. I watch how they move, what they bump into, where they naturally gather. The wood can wait. The design can wait. Understanding comes first. Elena felt something shifting inside her chest, like a door opening that had been closed for a long time. I don't think I've ever really listened to my employees. Sure you have. You just listened to their productivity metrics instead of their actual needs. It was a gentle observation, but it hit Elena like a revelation. All those employee surveys focused on efficiency and satisfaction scores. All those meetings about optimizing workflow and maximizing output. She'd been listening to data about people instead of listening to people themselves. I want to learn, she said quietly. Marcus looked at her across his workbench, and Elena felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with magazine covers or conference stages. Then we'll figure it out together, he said. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in what used to be the sterile executive conference room, watching Marcus teach her head of engineering how to use a drill. Feel the resistance, Marcus was saying to Janet, whose hands shook slightly as she guided the bit through a piece of practice wood. The drill will tell you when you're pushing too hard. Janet Mitt, Ph.D., 20 years of software development experience, looked like she was performing surgery. But when the hole came out clean and straight, she grinned like a kid. I did that. You did that, Marcus confirmed. Elena smiled from the doorway. The executive floor was in complete chaos. Temporary walls divided spaces into construction zones. The air smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. Cables snaked across the floor, waiting to be rerouted. It should have felt like disaster. Instead, it felt like possibility. How's it going? David appeared beside her, tablet in hand, looking slightly shocked. The board is asking for updates. Tell them we're on schedule. Elena stepped around a stack of reclaimed lumber. Better than on schedule, actually. Elena, I need to scare you sure about all this. The employees are excited, but the investors are nervous. Stock price is down 8% since the renovation announcement. Elena watched Marcus help another engineer this one from the VRT measure twice before cutting once. David, when did you last see Janet smile at work? I don't know. When she solved the rendering problem last quarter? That was 6 months ago. She's smiling now. Because she drilled a hole in a piece of wood. Because she built something with her hands. Because someone trusted her to learn something new. Elena turned to face her CFO. When we hire engineers, we're not just buying their technical skills, we're hiring whole human beings. What if we actually treated them that way? David looked around the construction zone with the expression of someone watching a careful structure being dismantled. What if this doesn't work? What if productivity drops? What if we lose key people who don't like the changes? Then we'll adapt. But David, what if it does work? What if people start staying past 5 p.m. because they want to, not because they have to? What if innovation happens in living rooms instead of conference rooms? Living rooms? Elena pointed toward the far corner, where Marcus was installing a conversation area with actual couches and a coffee table made from reclaimed wood. Soft lighting, warm colors, space for people to sit and think and talk without the formal structure of a meeting. "Trust me," she said. But Elena wasn't sure she trusted herself. Over the past 3 weeks, as construction progressed, she'd found herself spending more time on the 37th floor than in her office. Not supervising, she'd learned that Marcus worked better without micromanagement but absorbing the energy of transformation. She'd started eating lunch in the temporary kitchen Marcus had set up, sitting on folding chairs with employees who seemed surprised to see their CEO eating sandwich wraps instead of catered salads. She'd learned that Sarah from marketing was teaching herself guitar, that the new intern from Stanford was worried about student loans, that 3 different engineers were working on side projects that could revolutionize their core VR platform. Information she'd never gathered in 15 years of formal employee reviews. "Elena?" Marcus appeared at her elbow, wiping paint from his hands. "Can I show you something?" She followed him toward what used to be the main conference room. The glass walls were gone, replaced by movable partitions that could create intimate spaces or open collaborative areas depending on need. But that wasn't what Marcus wanted to show her. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a wall near the new kitchen area. Someone had started a sketch on the temporary drywall rough lines that looked like a design for some kind of interface. But instead of erasing it, other people had added to it. Suggestions in different handwriting, small improvements, questions and answers layered on top of each other. "Janet started it yesterday," Marcus explained. "Something about improving the user experience for their training modules. By this morning, 6 other people had contributed." Elena studied the collaborative drawing. It was messy, unofficial, completely outside any formal design process. It was also brilliant. In the old conference room, this would have taken 3 meetings and a week of follow-up emails, she said. Now it takes a marker and a willingness to build on someone else's idea. Elena touched the wall lightly, feeling the texture of the temporary surface. "You know what's funny? I spent $2.4 billion to acquire innovation, but it was here all along." "It was trapped," Marcus corrected. "Innovation needs room to breathe." They stood together looking at the sketch, and Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the particular satisfaction that came from watching people create rather than consume. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. What happened with your ex-wife, if you don't mind me asking?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still on the collaborative drawing. "Sarah was a marketing director at a tech company. Brilliant, driven, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. We met at a coffee shop. She was working on her laptop. I was sketching furniture designs. Seemed like fate." Elena could picture people creating different things in the same space, drawn together by shared intensity. "What went wrong?" "Nothing went wrong exactly. We just wanted different things. She needed to move fast, pivot constantly, chase the next opportunity. I needed to slow down, listen carefully, build things that lasted." Marcus picked up a pencil from a nearby workbench, rolling it between his fingers. "We loved each other, but we couldn't find a rhythm that worked for both of us." "How long were you married?" 4 years. Lily was 3 when Sarah took a job in New York. We tried long distance for a while, but," Marcus shrugged, "some things don't survive that kind of strain." Elena felt a pang of recognition. How many relationships had she ended because her work demanded everything? How many people had she loved from a distance measured in 18-hour days and cross-country flights? "Do you regret it?" "I regret that we couldn't figure it out, but I don't regret having Lily, and I don't regret learning to listen better." Marcus looked at Elena directly. "What about you? Ever been married?" Engaged once, to another CEO. We kept scheduling our wedding around earnings calls and product launches until we realized we were treating our relationship like a business merger. What happened? We called it off. Mutually. Very civilized. Very efficient. Elena laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her. I threw myself into work afterward. Told myself that building something meaningful was more important than building a life with someone. And now? Elena looked around the construction zone at people learning new skills, at spaces being transformed, at the evidence of collaboration happening organically. Now I'm wondering if maybe they're the same thing. Marcus was quiet, but Elena felt him listening in that way he had fully present, completely focused. It was intoxicating after years of conversations that happened while people checked phones and calculated priorities. The board meeting is next week, she said. They're going to want to see results. What kind of results? Numbers, productivity metrics, proof that this renovation is worth the investment. And what will you tell them? Elena thought about Janet's smile, about the collaborative drawing on the temporary wall, about employees who'd started staying late, not because they had to, but because they were excited about what they were building. I'll tell them the truth, that we're not just renovating office space. We're renovating how we think about work, about people, about what it means to build something that matters. Think they'll understand? Some will. Others. Elena shrugged. Others will focus on the stock price and miss the point entirely. Which kind of person are you? It was a simple question, but Elena felt it land like a challenge. For 15 years, she'd been the kind of person who focused on metrics and margins, who measured success in acquisitions and market share. But standing in this space that was becoming something new, something more human, she felt herself changing. I'm trying to be a different kind of person, she said quietly. Marcus nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Change is scary, terrifying. But not changing is scarier. Elena looked at him, really looked. Paint in his hair from the morning's work, calluses on his hands from years of building things that lasted. Eyes that had learned to see possibility in empty spaces. Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for stopping that night, for all of this. Thank you for calling. They stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by the sounds of construction and collaboration. Elena felt something settling in her chest knot, the weight of responsibility she'd carried for years, but something lighter. Something that felt like hope. The board meeting took place in Virtutech's original conference room on the 15th floor, the one space Marcus hadn't been allowed to touch yet. Elena stood at the head of the polished table, looking at faces that represented billions in investment capital and decades of Silicon Valley experience. Before we discuss the quarterly numbers, she began, I want to show you something. She clicked her presentation remote, and instead of charts and graphs, photos filled the screen. The executive floor during construction. Employees learning to use tools. The collaborative drawing on the temporary wall. 3 weeks ago, we began a comprehensive renovation of our workspace. Not just cosmetic changes, fundamental reimagining of how our people work and interact. Board member Catherine Walsh, 70, 2 years old, 40 years of VC experience, frowned at the images. Elena, while these photos are interesting, I'm more concerned about the productivity impact. Construction disruption, employee distraction, the opportunity cost. Productivity is up 12%, Elena interrupted smoothly. Employee satisfaction scores have increased by 38%. We've had 0 voluntary departures in the past 3 weeks, compared to an average of 6 per month over the previous year. The room fell silent. Richard Park, chairman of the board, leaned forward. Those are impressive numbers. But correlation isn't causation. How do we know the renovation is responsible? Elena clicked to the next slide of testimonials from employees, quotes about feeling more engaged, more creative, more connected to their work and colleagues. Because they told us. When we asked them directly, not through anonymous surveys, but in actual conversations, they told us that feeling trusted to shape their environment made them more invested in their work. Conversations? Catherine looked skeptical. That's anecdotal evidence, not data. It's both. Elena said firmly, Numbers tell us what happened. Conversations tell us why it happened, and whether it's sustainable. She clicked through more photo spaces that were beginning to take shape, areas where formal cubicles had been replaced by flexible neighborhoods, the kitchen where real conversations were happening. We're not just building better offices, we're building a better company culture. One where innovation happens organically, where people feel seen and valued, where work becomes something people want to do rather than something they have to endure. David spoke up from his seat beside her. The financial projections are solid. If productivity gains continue at current rates, the renovation will pay for itself within 18 months. And if they don't? Richard asked. Elena met his gaze directly. Then we'll learn something valuable about what our people need, and we'll adapt accordingly. But I don't think that's going to happen. Why? Because for the first time in Virtutech's history, we're designing our workspace around human beings instead of around efficiency metrics. And human beings, it turns out, are pretty good at innovation when you give them room to breathe. The questions continued for another hour. Elena answered them all, but she found herself thinking about Marcus, probably on site at some family's kitchen renovation, listening carefully to what they needed their space to become. When the meeting ended, Catherine approached her privately. Elena, I've been on this board for 5 years. I've never seen you talk about your employees the way you did today. What do you mean? Like they're people instead of resources. Catherine smiled, the first genuine expression Elena had seen from her. It's refreshing, but also risky. You're betting the company's future on the idea that happiness translates to performance. I'm betting on the idea that when people feel valued, they do their best work. It's not really a bet, it's just human nature. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. I hope you're right, for all our sakes. After the board members left, Elena sat alone in the sterile conference room, thinking about the contrast between this space and the vibrant chaos happening 12 floors above. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did it go? She typed back. Good. But I think we need to renovate the boardroom next. Ah, the final boss level. Elena smiled at her phone. Something like that. Dinner tonight? I'll cook. A pause then. You cook? I'm learning. Fair warning, it might be terrible. I'll bring backup pizza. Just in case. Elena looked around the conference room one more time, then headed toward the elevator. Somewhere above her, people were building something new together. And for the first time in 15 years, she was excited to be part of something that was growing rather than just growing more valuable. Elena's penthouse kitchen had never seen actual cooking. The Viking range was pristine, the copper pots still had their protective stickers, and the spice rack contained bottles that looked more decorative than functional. She stood at the marble island, staring at the salmon fillets she'd optimistically purchased, wondering what had possessed her to think she could cook for someone who built things with his hands. Her phone buzzed. Downstairs with pizza backup. Coming up. Elena looked around her immaculate kitchen, all surfaces and no soul, like everything else in her life until recently. She'd spent 45 minutes trying to make the space look lived in, but you couldn't fake the warmth that came from years of actual use. The elevator chimed, and Marcus emerged carrying a pizza box and wearing the same paint-stained jeans from earlier, now with wood dust in his hair. Holy. He stopped in the entryway, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the designer furniture, the view that stretched across Silicon Valley like a circuit board made of light. This is where you live? Elena felt suddenly self-conscious. It's too much, isn't it? It's beautiful, also completely terrifying. Marcus set the pizza box on her kitchen island, looking around the space with his contractor's eye. How long have you lived here? 3 years. I bought it after the IPO. Do you like it? Elena paused, really considering the question. I like the view, the location, the security. She looked around her showcase kitchen. But I don't think I've ever felt at home here. Marcus opened one of her pristine cabinets, revealing dishes that looked like they'd never been used. When did you last cook something in this kitchen? I made coffee this morning. Does that count? Not even close. Marcus rolled up his sleeves. Okay, new plan. We're going to cook together. Something simple. I bought salmon. Marcus looked at the expensive fillets sitting on her marble counter. Let's save those for when you're not terrified of your own kitchen. Tonight we start with scrambled eggs. I can make scrambled eggs. Can you? Elena opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She could manage a board meeting, negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions, and run a company with 3,000 employees. But standing in her own kitchen, she felt helpless. Teach me, she said quietly. Marcus smiled and opened her refrigerator, which contained mostly bottled water and takeout containers. We're going to need to go shopping. 30 minutes later, they were walking the aisles of a Whole Foods. Marcus pushing the cart while Elena followed with the strange sensation of being a tourist in normal life. Eggs, butter, cheese, Marcus was saying, adding items to their cart. Something green. When did you last eat a vegetable that wasn't on a catered lunch plate? I don't know. Tuesday? What kind of vegetable? Elena thought about it. Does arugula on a sandwich count? Marcus stopped walking and looked at her with something between amusement and concern. Elena, how do you eat? Efficiently. Protein bars for breakfast, salads for lunch, whatever gets delivered to my office for dinner. She picked up a bunch of asparagus, examining it like a foreign object. I know it's not healthy. I just never learned. This. Grocery shopping? Living, taking care of myself beyond the minimum required for functionality. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her across the produce section. What did your parents teach you about food? Elena felt that familiar tightness in her chest. They taught me that food was fuel, something to consume quickly so you could get back to work. My mom would make these huge batches of rice and beans on Sunday that would last all week. Efficient, practical. Not enjoyable? They didn't have time for enjoyable. They were working 3 jobs between them, trying to keep us afloat. Elena touched a tomato tentatively. I learned that if you wanted more than just survival, you had to work harder than everyone else. Food, sleep, relationships, those were luxuries you earned after you'd secured everything else. And when did you plan to earn them? Elena looked around the grocery store at families choosing ingredients together, at couples debating wine pairings, at the domestic intimacy she'd never made time for. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I'd figure it out eventually. After the next milestone, the next acquisition, the next whatever. Marcus added herbs to their cart: basil, cilantro, things that existed purely to make food taste better rather than just provide nutrition. What if eventually is now? They cooked together in Elena's pristine kitchen, Marcus guiding her through the basics. How to tell when butter was properly melted. Why use scrambled eggs slowly, patiently. The way herbs release their fragrance when you chop them. Feel this, Marcus said, guiding her hand to the pan's handle. The heat is even across the whole surface. That's how you know it's ready. Elena found herself focusing on sensations she'd never noticed: the weight of the pan, the sound of butter sizzling, the way the kitchen filled with aromas that had nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with care. I understand why people like this, she said, watching their eggs take shape. Cooking? Creating something from nothing. Using your hands. Being present in the moment instead of thinking 3 steps ahead. Marcus smiled, adding cheese to their eggs. You're a quick learner. They ate at her dining table, which had never been used for anything but spreading out work documents. The scrambled eggs were simple, but they tasted different from anything Elena had eaten in months. Warmer, more satisfying, made with intention instead of consumed out of necessity. This is nice, she said, then immediately felt foolish for stating something so obvious. When did you last eat dinner with someone? Marcus asked gently. Elena thought about it. Business dinners, networking events, the occasional meal with her parents when guilt overrode her schedule. I don't know. A real dinner with someone I actually wanted to spend time with? Years, maybe? That's heartbreaking. It's practical. Relationships require maintenance, time, emotional energy I needed for building the company. Marcus set down his fork. Elena, can I ask you something that might sound harsh? Sure. What was the point of building the company if you weren't going to have a life to go with it? The question hit her like cold water. Elena looked around her penthouse, the expensive furniture, the stunning view, the evidence of success by every external measure. I thought the life would come later. After I'd proven I could succeed, after I'd secured enough money to help my parents, after I'd built something that mattered. And now? Elena thought about the past month, the renovation, the conversations with employees, the way it felt to use her hands to create something, even if it was just scrambled eggs. Now I'm wondering if I built the wrong thing, or the right thing in the wrong way. They were quiet for a moment, the city lights stretching out below them like promises Elena had made to herself and never kept. "It's not too late," Marcus said finally. "Isn't it? I'm 37 years old. I've spent 15 years optimizing my life for productivity instead of happiness. I don't know how to have relationships. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to just be." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were rough from work, warm from holding things that mattered. "You stopped on a highway at 2 a.m. to help a stranger. You learned to use a drill in 3 weeks. You cooked dinner tonight instead of ordering takeout." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're already changing." Elena felt tears she hadn't expected, years of carefully controlled emotion suddenly close to the surface. "I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of slowing down and realizing I've wasted half my life. Of discovering that success isn't the same thing as meaning. Of wanting things I don't know how to have." Marcus was quiet, his thumb tracing small circles on her hand. "Like what?" he asked softly. Elena looked at him across her dining table paint, stained, patient, fully present in a way that felt revolutionary after years of scattered attention and divided focus. "Like this," she whispered. "Like someone who sees me instead of my resume. Like cooking dinner together and talking about things that matter. Like building something that brings people together instead of just making them more efficient. Those don't sound like impossible things. They do to me. I don't know how to be in a relationship. I don't know how to make space for someone else in a life I've structured around constant motion." Marcus lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her chest ache. "Maybe you don't have to know everything at once. Maybe you just have to be willing to learn." Elena felt something breaking open inside her, not breaking apart, but breaking free. Years of careful control dissolving into something messier but more real. "I want to learn," she said. "I want to try." Marcus smiled, and Elena felt like she was seeing possibilities instead of problems for the first time in years. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said. One scrambled egg at a time. They cleaned the kitchen together, Elena learning the rhythm of shared domestic tasks: wash, dry, put away, the simple choreography of two people making a space whole. When Marcus left that night, Elena stood at her window looking out at the city, but instead of seeing a circuit board of ambition, she saw lights in windows where people were living actual lives, making dinner, reading bedtime stories, having conversations that mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thank you for tonight. Sleep well." Elena typed back, "Thank you for teaching me, for everything." She looked around her penthouse, still beautiful, still impressive, but no longer feeling like a monument to isolation. Tomorrow, she would continue learning about cooking, about relationships, about what it meant to build a life instead of just a career. For the first time in 15 years, Elena Vasquez went to sleep, excited about who she might become instead of what she might achieve. End of Part 5, ready for final part. 6 months later, Elena stood in the Virtutech lobby watching a 7-year-old girl teach the head of engineering how to build a blanket fort. "The corners have to be weighted down," Lily Chen was explaining seriously to Janet, who crouched beside her with the same focused intensity she usually reserved for debugging code. "Otherwise, the whole structure collapses." "Like load-bearing walls," Janet nodded. "I understand the physics." "It's not physics," Lily corrected. "It's architecture. My daddy taught me." Elena smiled, watching Lily direct the construction of what had become Virtutech's first official Bring Your Child to Work Day. The renovated lobby buzzed with activity engineers explaining algorithms to curious 8-year-olds, designers helping teenagers sketch app interfaces, parents and children collaborating on projects that bridge the gap between work and life. "She's got your project management skills," Sarah Kim observed, joining Elena near the reception desk. "Also, your daddy's patience." Elena looked around for Marcus and found him near the main staircase, helping a group of kids build something elaborate with cardboard and tape. He caught her eye across the lobby and grinned, gesturing to their creation, some kind of robot, apparently, with moving parts and LED lights powered by battery packs. 6 months ago, this lobby was pristine, Elena said. All glass and steel and intimidation. Now it's chaos, Sarah agreed. Beautiful chaos. It was true. The space Marcus had redesigned felt alive, flexible seating areas where people gathered naturally, living walls with actual plants, lighting that changed throughout the day to match natural rhythms. Today, with children's laughter echoing off the walls and impromptu learning stations scattered throughout the space, it felt like what Elena had always imagined a tech company could be. A place where innovation happened through human connection, rather than despite it. "Elena?" David appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand, looking slightly overwhelmed by the creative disorder. "The quarterly board presentation is ready for your review." Elena took the tablet and scrolled through familiar slides: revenue projections, market share analysis, competitive positioning, all the metrics that had once defined her world. "These numbers are good," she said. "They're incredible. Productivity up 43% year over year. Employee retention at 97%. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest in company history." David paused. "The board wants to know if we're planning to roll out the renovation model to other offices." Elena looked around the transformed lobby, thinking about the 12 other Virtutech locations around the world, sterile, efficient spaces where people worked in isolation rather than collaboration. "Set up meetings with local contractors in each city. I want to understand their communities, their work cultures, before we design anything." "You want to do this 12 more times?" Elena watched Marcus help a 10-year-old wire an LED into their cardboard robot. "I want to do it right 12 more times. Each office should reflect the people who work there, not some corporate template." David made notes, but Elena could see the question in his expression. "You think I've lost focus on the business?" she said. "I think you've found focus on something else, which might be the same thing." Elena handed back the tablet and walked toward Marcus's impromptu engineering workshop. A cluster of children surrounded him, all talking at once, while he listened with the same careful attention he'd shown her employees during the renovation planning. "What are you building?" she asked, crouching beside Lily. "A friendship robot," Lily announced. "It lights up when people are nice to each other." "How does it know when people are being nice?" Lily looked at her like the answer was obvious. "You tell it. With this button." She pointed to a large red button Marcus had mounted on the side of their cardboard creation. "When someone does something kind, you press it, and the robot celebrates." Elena studied their creation: cardboard and tape and LED lights, powered by imagination and the belief that kindness was worth celebrating. "That's brilliant," she said. "It was Daddy's idea, but I made it better," Lily said proudly. "That's how the best projects work," Marcus said, meeting Elena's eyes over his daughter's head. "Collaboration." Later, after the families had gone home, and the lobby had been restored to its flexible but organized state, Elena and Marcus walked through the renovated floors together. It had become their evening ritual, checking on spaces, noting how people had adapted the areas to their needs, planning small improvements. The engineering team rearranged their neighborhood again. Elena observed, looking at a cluster of workstations that had been reconfigured into a horseshoe shape around a large whiteboard. "Third time this month," Marcus agreed. "They're iterating on their environment the same way they iterate on code. Is that good or bad? It's human. They're making the space work for them instead of working despite the space." Elena thought about her old office: fixed, formal, designed to project authority rather than encourage creativity. She'd moved to a smaller space on the 37th floor, with windows but also proximity to her team, walls that could be written on, furniture that could be rearranged based on need. I got an interesting call today, she said, as they climbed the stairs toward the executive floor. Oh? Harvard Business School? They want to do a case study on VirtuTech's transformation. Apparently we're becoming a model for human-centered workplace design. Marcus paused on the landing. How do you feel about that? Elena considered the question. 6 months ago, being featured in business school curricula would have felt like validation, proof that she'd achieved something important. Now it felt different. Proud, but also worried. I don't want this to become another business strategy that companies implement without understanding why it works. Which is that it's not about the furniture or the lighting or the flexible walls. It's about seeing employees as whole human beings instead of just productivity units. They reached the 37th floor, where Elena's new office sat among the collaborative spaces Marcus had designed. Through the glass partitions, she could see evidence of the day's work: whiteboards covered with diagrams, comfortable seating areas where people had clearly spent time thinking together, plants that employees had brought from home to personalize their spaces. I need to tell you something, Elena said as they settled into her office. Marcus looked up from the portfolio of renovation photos he'd been reviewing. What? Elena felt suddenly nervous, which was ridiculous. She'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But sitting across from Marcus in her transformed office, she felt like a teenager working up courage to ask someone to prom. The New York office renovation. I want you to oversee it personally. Marcus set down the portfolio. Elena, that's a 6-month project minimum. I can't be away from Lily that long. I know. That's why I'm asking if you'd consider relocating. Both of you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them had spoken directly. Are you asking me to move to New York for work? Marcus asked carefully. Elena felt her heart racing. I'm asking if you'd consider moving to New York for us. For whatever this is becoming. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the soft lighting he'd designed for this space. What is this becoming? He asked softly. Elena thought about the past 6 months' dinners cooked together, mornings when Marcus arrived early to walk through the construction sites with her, evenings when they'd talked about everything except the obvious growing connection between them. I don't know, she admitted. I've never been good at relationships. I don't know how to balance loving someone with running a company. I don't know how to be part of a family. Lily adores you. I adore her too. But Marcus, I don't know how to be a step-parent. I don't know how to put someone else's needs before my work. I'm terrified I'll disappoint you both. Marcus stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights that had become the backdrop to their unlikely connection. Do you remember what you told the board 6 months ago? About betting on human nature instead of efficiency metrics? Yes. Maybe relationships work the same way. Maybe you don't have to know everything at once. Maybe you just have to be willing to figure it out together. Elena joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. What if I fail at this? What if you succeed? Elena thought about that, about waking up next to someone who understood both her ambitions and her need for quiet moments, about helping a 7-year-old with homework, about building a life that was as thoughtfully designed as the spaces Marcus created. The New York project would be different, she said quietly. Not just renovation, but designing VirtuTech's East Coast headquarters from the ground up. A chance to create something entirely new. With you? With me, if you want to. Marcus turned to face her, his hands finding hers in the gesture that had become familiar over months of small touches and careful attention. Are you asking me to be your business partner? Or your life partner? Elena felt the question settle in her chest like a key finding its lock. Both, she said. If you're willing to teach me how. Marcus smiled, that same genuine expression she'd first seen on a dark highway 6 months ago, when he'd stopped to help a stranger and changed both their lives. I think we can figure it out, he said. One project at a time. Elena kissed him then, surrounded by the transformation they'd created together, tasting possibility and promise and the particular sweetness of lives that had found their way to each other through broken-down cars and the willingness to stop and help. When they broke apart, Elena looked around her office, warm lighting, flexible spaces, evidence everywhere of human creativity and collaboration. Then she looked at Marcus, solid and steady and ready to build something new together. "So," she said, "New York?" "New York," Marcus agreed. "Though I should warn you, Lily's going to have opinions about her new room." Elena laughed, imagining the negotiations ahead, the compromises and discoveries that came with building a life with other people instead of just for herself. "I'm counting on it," she said. Outside her window, Silicon Valley sparkled with the dreams of thousands of people building futures they couldn't yet fully imagine. But inside her transformed office, Elena Vasquez felt like she'd finally learned the difference between building a career and building a life, and discovered they could be the same thing if you were willing to design them with love instead of just ambition. In the end, it had taken a broken-down car and a stranger's kindness to teach her that the most important structures weren't made of glass and steel, but of trust and time and the daily choice to see each other clearly. Elena Vasquez, CEO, looked at Marcus Chen, contractor, and saw the blueprint for everything she'd never known she wanted to build, together.